Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, president of Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training, and my special guest today is an old friend of mine, Chris LaFleur, who's the senior director of McLarty Associates. And so, Chris, you've had how many years in Japan altogether now?
30 odd.
30 odd, right? So, you know, you're a senior director at McLarty. We can talk a little bit about that. And then let's go back and retrace your career a little bit, because you've had an amazing career, I have to say. You look at it on paper, it's incredible. So what does McLarty do?
McLarty is a global strategic advisory company based in Washington, D.C. It was set up by a couple of the senior-most officials in the Clinton administration a number of years ago. They recognized that the U.S. government had a lot of talent and resources and was in a position to offer companies the kind of advice that the U.S. government takes advantage of from its senior officials when those officials leave government. And so most of the personnel at McLarty are Washington, D.C. based, although there are a number like me who are stationed overseas. We help generally larger global clients address the kinds of challenges they may run into in conducting their business largely outside of the United States. Those challenges, given the sort of skill sets that people like us have based on our earlier careers, generally focus on the kinds of regulatory, government policy, and sometimes political and policy-related issues that companies may face as they try to operate overseas. Some cases we're helping assist companies who are new to market, who are trying to get advice on what the best practices are for entering the Japanese market, in my case here in Japan. In other cases, it's dealing with companies that already have well-established operations, including in Japan, but need a second opinion or some outside advice, or maybe bringing in somebody with a slightly different background and skill set to help the folks back at headquarters and here in Japan sort out issues that they're facing.
And so you're originally State Department,
right,
and then posted to Japan, and you've been ambassador in Malaysia. So just run us through, why did you choose the State Department? How did you wind up in Japan? And then you came back to Japan second time, I think. Is that right? I can't quite remember the order there. It's
more than second time.
Yeah, okay, run us back. How is it that
Sure.
you chose, why the State Department? How did you get to Japan? Just finish the story a little bit there for us.
Absolutely. Well, I came to the conviction early on, and even while I was in college, that I wanted to join the government and try to serve the public interest from that in that capacity. So I took the State Department Foreign Service exam while it was my senior year in school, and within about a year or so, the State Department let me know that I had passed and was invited to join the State Department. So I did effectively after only a year of graduate school, and the rest, sort of unrolled in a fairly typical government or I should say State Department career.
So is that interest in going into government? I mean, America's, a center of capitalism. It's the American dream. It's a lot of people going necessarily into private sector. Was there a history in your family of serving in the State Department? Why did you have that? Why didn't you say I'm going to be a corporate guy rather than a government representative?
Well, I think you have to sort of look back to the period in which I was coming to those decisions. This was the era of the Vietnam War.
So just give us a year. What year are we in?
Okay, so we're talking the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, okay. So Vietnam War is still raging. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And in that environment, questions of public policy were in the front of everyone's mind, particularly young people, and most particularly young men who were facing in those days
The draft.
what was the draft.
I was one of them
Okay, so
in Australia. I was about, we had a change of government in 1972, and Gough Whitlam got in and said, right, we're out of Vietnam. But I was literally months away. Your birth date numbers go into a raffle sort of thing, numbers sort of thing. And if your numbers come up, you're off to Vietnam. And I know with my luck, I would have gone for sure. Right. Guaranteed I would have been coming up with home numbers. So I understand that situation quite clearly. So from that, you get into government and you're in the State Department. And I mean, do they notice you have an interest in Japan at the time, or you didn't have an interest in Japan particularly, or how did you gravitate towards Japan?
Well, when I joined the State Department, I had the assumption that they would make some practical use of my background. And at that point, I had spent a lot of time studying Chinese, spent a year on Taiwan studying. And so since that was my primary foreign-related skill, other than a college education, I just assumed that they would send me someplace where I could make use of that. And the State Department has a different view of their personnel development than perhaps a lot of folks would. And they want to send you to someplace maybe where you don't have any particular background, because that provides, I think, in the view of some folks at the State Department, the best opportunity to gauge how well you can adapt to the variety of postings that you're likely to have in a foreign service career, as well as begin to train you in learning the kinds of adaptive skills that are necessary to land on your feet and try to serve U.S. government interests in a foreign location.
So where did they send you the first posting then?
So the first posting literally was Japan.
Right. So you studied Chinese, fluent Chinese. Great. You're going to Japan.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
Well,
and I guess, though, in Taiwan, though, you were learning full-form characters rather than simplified script, I guess.
Correct.
Yeah, because I did Chinese in Australia, and we did simplified script, so quite different to Japanese,
Indeed. That is an important difference. But I think you're right in suggesting that having some Chinese background does give you a leg up when you're beginning to study Japanese, since the characters are certainly one of the various battle or burdens rather that new English-speaking students have to deal with when they're studying
And then you
Japanese.
discover the joys of katakana, because in Chinese there's no katakana, so they just put all these characters, all these hansa together to make a foreign name, and it makes no rhyme or reason if you don't know if you can't pick up the name straight away. You think it's got meaning. No meaning, just sound. That was just like, I think I was doing Douglas MacArthur or something in Chinese, and I could not work out what the hell. None of these hansa make any sense. They're not compounds. What's going on? Then slowly the penny dropped. It's a sound. So when I came to Japan and katakana, oh, good. You know it's a foreign name of some type. Right. And so how long did you spend in the first posting in Japan?
Well, I started off as the lowly vice consul in Sapporo. Which was a wonderful assignment. So Sapporo is a great city, and Hokkaido and northern Japan are a wonderful environment to begin to appreciate the Japanese culture and certainly to help get you a grounding in Japanese language. And at the same time, it's particularly Hokkaido is probably the part of Japan that, if any, can be said to be, is most similar to the United States, simply by virtue of the fact that most of the Japanese residents who settled Hokkaido originally under the Japanese government guidance came from other parts of Japan. And so, in a sense, the Japanese in Hokkaido all have immigrant roots of their own as well, or most of them do.
I guess too also the language, because I understand, as I remember, that there's no Hokkaido accent per se. It's a standard Japanese. So if you're sent to some other part of Japan, you might be dealing with people who are not speaking standard Japanese, got a very strong regional dialect or something. But Hokkaido would have been standard Japanese, I guess.
Exactly.
Which would have been helpful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So so it was a great posting, and I went from there to another year of Japanese language training down in Yokohama, then up to the embassy for a couple of years working in the political section, and at the same time as the deputy labor attaché. And then finally I went up to...
Does the deputy labor attaché have much to do in Japan for the American government?
There are maybe not any labor attachés, technically speaking, left overseas for the U.S. government. But at the time when I was doing this, the U.S. government was paying a lot of attention to labor-related issues with key partners overseas, particularly where there would be trade issues that would be of concern to American labor. And so in countries like Japan and most of our major European partner countries, there were labor attachés stationed whose jobs were to both understand the labor market conditions in Japan, in our case, but also to maintain contact with the labor unions and related organizations that were active. And of course, in Japan, that meant being in contact with the large, both public and private sector unions, which were back in those days even more powerful than they are today.
Much more powerful in those days, yeah. And so usually you have so many continuous postings in a country and they make you go out. So in your case, where did they send you after Japan?
They sent me to my first hardship post, Washington, D.C.
It would have been, after Tokyo, that would have been a hardship post. Back to headquarters, right? Okay.
Right, back to headquarters. So, yeah, it's absolutely something you need to do and ought to be doing, representing the U.S. government overseas. You ought to be learning a little bit more about how your own government operates. And so it's actually an important stage in your development as a Foreign Service officer to have such postings in Washington. I had a very interesting assignment as working on the staff of the Secretary of State, who in those days was Al Haig.
Oh, Al Haig, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we, were basically staffing him for all his documents and major decisions, as well as preparing for trips overseas and that sort of thing. So it was a shotgun education, very broadly speaking, in how the State Department operates and how the U.S. government deals with foreign policy issues.
And how long before they brought you back to Japan?
Well, a few more years, because from Washington, I went to another hardship assignment, Paris. I take it back. First, I went to New York for an assignment at the U.S. mission to the UN.
Okay, all right.
Which was another education in and of itself in how international diplomacy operates and sometimes doesn't. And then following that, I was sent to the U.S. Embassy in Paris, which in those days had a position in the political section, which had the main responsibility of following U.S. and French European relations with Asia. This dated back, going back to our earlier conversation about Vietnam. This goes back to the days when the U.S. was managing secret diplomacy contacts with the Vietnamese in Paris. I was considerably after that period. The war had ended, and we weren't quite so focused on those sorts of issues. But this was during the period of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the French had a particular set of experts and scholars who had very good experience and contacts in Afghanistan. And so one of my roles there was to try to provide some liaison between those experts and the government so that we could have a better sense of how things were proceeding in Afghanistan.
And then at some point they bring you back to Japan.
Yes, so after that, I came back to Japan.
What was the position when you came back?
I was the director of the Office of Politico-Military Affairs in our political section.
Right. So that would have been what, minister level at that stage? Or
no, this is
council level?
below the minister level. This is so this is like what would normally be called a first or second secretary position. Okay. And my responsibility was to help manage the issues both from a broad policy aspect, but also dealing with particular problems and issues that arose, all connected with the operation of the U.S.-Japan alliance. And of course, with a number of U.S. military facilities located in Japan, and quite a few U.S. military personnel in Japan, as well as an alliance structure that is critical to ensuring peace and security in the region. That job was a fascinating opportunity to actually try to make some positive impact on U.S.-Japan relations.
And at some point, was it continuous that you stayed in Japan and you got to the sort of rank of minister and basically one below the ambassador level? Well, does that sort of step through, or did you have to go out and come back again?
You have to go out, keep going back and forth.
Back and forth.
Takes a little while.
Yeah.
So after that stint in Japan, I returned to Washington for another few years, where I was the assistant, the special assistant to the head of the East Asia Bureau in the State Department, and then after that, the director of what was then the office in the East Asia Bureau that handled relations with the countries of Indochina, so Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And this was the period before we had resumed official relations with Vietnam, and we were in fact negotiating with the Vietnamese on the steps that would lead to normalization of relations, as well as trying to resolve the terrible problems that had been created in Cambodia by the takeover of the Khmer Rouge. So we had I had personally a very what I regarded as fulfilling opportunity to try to help move the United States policy forward from the era of the Vietnam War toward an era of greater cooperation and peace.
And then you come back, and this time you're at the senior level, I guess, in the embassy?
So then I was sent to Taiwan, finally, to get to use my Chinese after 25
How many
years.
How
after
much
I've
Chinese
been
is left after 25 years?
Not a
Was
whole
it all
lot.
in the back of the head there, just came out, or not?
Right. Well, it's one of those things that you begin to reabsorb once you're in the environment. So I spent nearly 4 years as the deputy director of the U.S. office in Taiwan that represents the United States government interests there.
Actually, it's not actually an embassy, is it?
It's
Because
not-
of the
it's
political
not an
sensitivity of
official
one
embassy.
China, so it has the equivalent role, I guess.
It has the equivalent roles, but it's called the American Institute in Taiwan.
That's right, yeah. And then from there, back to Japan, or back
And
to
from
Russia?
there, I returned to Japan as the number 2 at the embassy and the senior minister
And the ambassador at that time was which ambassador?
Tom Foley.
Oh, Tom Foley. Okay, Tom. All right, good. And so from that, you then did you go directly from there to Malaysia as the ambassador, or
No,
back
I
to
went
Washington?
back to Washington again,
Oh,
and
gee, okay.
I was the number 2 in the Bureau of East Asian Affairs, and then spent a couple of years partly working at the Council on Foreign Relations on an assignment there on behalf of the department, as well as a negotiator on the future of the alliances with Japan and South Korea. And this was an era when we were looking at how the alliance structure that had been developed in the preceding 50 years needed to change to keep pace with the times, and negotiating with both the Japanese government and with the Republic of South Korea on whether there were intelligent changes that we could begin to put in place to further streamline and make more effective those alliances.
When you were in Malaysia as ambassador, was that the period of time when Mahathir was talking about look east? Was that coordination with that period?
Then former Prime Minister Mahathir, of course, he eventually returned again long after I left. But then former Prime Minister Mahathir was certainly still talking about looking east and still looking very much at Japan as a model for the kind of economic development that he and not a few others in Malaysia would have liked to see in Malaysia itself.
So it would be very interesting to have the ambassador from America, a fluent Japanese speaker, long experience in Japan, while they're actually thinking about, we've got to connect more with the East, and particularly Japan. So did you find that was a big advantage to you to further the cause there in the sense of having that expertise, which is not common? I mean, seriously not common in the diplomatic corps when you're in a Muslim country like Malaysia and here you're coming from Japan, or it didn't make any difference?
I think it did make some difference in that it's important to appreciate where Malaysia fits into the broader East Asia security and economic structures. So it was very helpful from that point of view. But as you've already pointed to, there are substantial differences, culturally, certainly in terms of religion, historic background, between Malaysia and Japan. So the experience in Japan, would certainly only take you so far. In addition, I was in Malaysia to represent the United States at basically the height of the Second Iraq War, and that was a decision by the United States that very few in Malaysia were particularly sympathetic with, and so it was an important part of my job to try to explain and hopefully secure a certain level of understanding of what the United States was trying to accomplish.
And then you come out of the diplomatic corps, you retire, I guess, from the State Department at some point in time, and then you go into the private sector.
Right.
So was it JPMorgan? Is I got that right?
That's correct.
What were you doing at JPMorgan at that time?
I was the vice chairman of JPMorgan Japan. And my principal role, since I obviously didn't come out of the financial world, was to focus on our external relations, and particularly related to government, to corporate social responsibility, and those sorts of things.
And you've been very much involved with the American Chamber as chairman for a very long time too. I think I forget how many years, but it seems like forever. But how many years was that altogether?
Well, I've served several stints. The chamber has a somewhat unique structure in that. The CEO, if you will, of the chamber is the elected president, and presidents get to serve a maximum of 2 years in that position. The chairman is a position to which the president can appoint a member, and not atypically. The folks who have served as chairman for the chamber are folks who have been former presidents or held other senior positions in the chamber structure over the years. So I served my 2 years as president of the chamber in 2016 and 17, and served as chairman for the 2 years before that and for a couple of years after, and I'm serving again now.
Yes, I know. You're very long rule there as the chairman, keeping the chamber going. In terms of thinking about, now you're working in the sort of consulting area, I guess. But if you think about your career in Japan, both in government, where you're often leading a lot of Japanese staff inside government, they work for the embassy, and then you're in the private sector, where you've got Japanese staff leading. What things did you find worked well to get people to be engaged, to follow you? Now, embassies are quite hierarchical, especially around local staff, so that's relatively, I guess, easier. But, you go out from the State Department into JPMorgan, and you're not coming from a finance background. So, how did you find things that work, help you say people, okay, follow me. I've got some ideas here, I've got experience here, and they could be engaged to follow you. What things did you find worked well for you?
Well, there's some obviously very substantial differences in the environment in government versus the private sector. And, perhaps the most important is that your directives are largely policy-driven and in some cases politically driven agendas that are directed to you for the most part until you get to the most senior levels. So you're largely, in a sense, carrying out orders. And the American Foreign Service is analogous to the U.S. military in a number of ways, and that's certainly one of them. So in that sense, as you rightly suggest, inside the government, there is a strong sense of hierarchy, and the leadership is a skill that is typically not well taught to folks in government, at least until they rise to fairly senior positions, and by dint of experience and toward the end of your career, some training, you actually learn something about management.
At the end, right?
Exactly. So,
but you also have the issue there. I mean, Japanese who work in foreign embassies often get paid extremely well. And I'm not going to say it's a cushy life, but they have a certain lifestyle and they have a lot of benefits, and they don't leave. They stay for a long time. And so they see people coming in on postings and going out on their postings, and here's another one, 4 years later he'll be gone. And so in one way, they're very hard to fire them, can't fire them, but you've got to engage them, And so in a way, they're probably, at one level, possibly a more difficult group to lead, potentially, maybe than the private sector. I don't know. What was your experience on that, comparing the two?
I don't know. I think, personally, I found the Japanese staff at the U.S. Embassy, and this goes, I would say, also for the staffs at other embassies I worked at over the years. I found them, by and large, to be very anxious and dedicated to trying to serve their positions, to fulfill their responsibilities to the best of their ability. And when you come to folks here in Japan, I think the biggest challenge for them was that U.S. government policy changes at least every 4 or 8 years.
Dramatically in some cases. Right?
And they are constantly, every 2 to 3 years, some cases 4, having to deal with a new boss. And sometimes multiple new bosses. So I don't think I would describe the lives of the U.S. Embassy Japanese staff as cushy at all. I think they faced some very trying times in having to adapt and figuring out how to educate the Americans, some of whom, in my case, I came multiple times, but for many, it's their first time and maybe their only time working in Japan, and helping those people who they're trying to advise figure out a country and a culture that is so different from their own is not a small undertaking in the least.
One thing too, people who haven't worked in government, we've worked in government, I've worked in the Australian Embassy, and I'm sure it's the same in the American government embassy. A lot of those Japanese staff have been there a long time, and over those years, they have built up incredible networks and contacts and have incredible detailed knowledge of certain sectors, and it's something you think, government, bureaucrats, what do they know? But actually the local staff who work there, if they're in a private sector with that degree of contacts, knowledge and expertise, they'd be getting paid pretty good money as well, I imagine. So often you have a very talented and, as you say, dedicated, but also knowledgeable, extremely knowledgeable and well-connected group of people working for you. So, connections that, because we're not there long enough, we'll probably never get, but they can get them. So I always found there was a tremendous resource there that people outside of the government may not even imagine that exists. But if you're helping foreign companies to succeed in Japan and you can tap into these incredible networks they have, it's going to save you a lot of time and point you in the right direction. That was my experience anyway, the Australian government. So.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Folks who haven't had the experience of operating overseas at an embassy probably won't appreciate the reality that your local staff are really the keys to your success, and being able to hire and retain the kinds of people you're talking about who will work over the years to develop the knowledge, the networks, the contacts that are critical to making things actually work in the real world in the country you're operating in. That staff is valuable, certainly beyond the staff that's sent out from capitals to periodically to take on the nominal responsibilities. But having the job doesn't mean you can actually accomplish it unless you've got the staff to help you. They're absolutely critical.
And how would you contrast, say, leading in the government with leading in the private sector? Because you've been in both, and you think about the private sector here. Was your approach different to get to engage those people to follow you than when you're in government, which we talked about a little bit, but what was your approach when you went to JPMorgan? How did you think about that?
Well, there are obviously some similarities in the sense that big organizations with a wide variety of interests, clearly more focused in the financial sector, but nevertheless, in an organization that large with that many folks and that many objectives to measure your success by, there are some similarities in terms of how you have to approach work there as well as in the government. So from my perspective, I didn't feel that there was such a dramatic transition. I have to admit that before I joined the private sector, I had the impression that decision-making was done in a much more, shall we say, calculated and easily measurable way. But once I joined a large U.S. business organization, I realized that some of the same principles still applied as they would in any large organization, and you have to be aware of where the key centers of the organization are, and how to interact most effectively. But I would say that the most important thing, is maintaining the ability to communicate effectively across a variety of levels in the organization. You have in both environments a range of relationships, including both your supervisors and your subordinates, as well as people whose collaboration is necessary in order for everyone to succeed. And so having that broad view of the set of relationships that you need in order to achieve your goals and your objectives is absolutely critical in both environments.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. What about, what have you found has worked well to get ideas from people? Because, when you probably first got to Sapporo and it's your first posting, so everything is new. And Sapporo Post is not so large, I'm sure. It's not like the embassy's a monster. American embassy is huge here in Tokyo, but Sapporo, I'm sure, is a bit more manageable. And so you are, as you say, going to be advised by Japanese staff who will help you to find your way. But at some point in time, you come back on multiple postings. You've had a lot of experience in Washington and other countries. You come back at a high level. So you've got a lot of ideas yourself about how policy, has to be enacted, or things we can report on, or things. And often we can tend to drive those things ourselves, but sometimes forget that the people who are working with us have actually got probably a treasure trove of ideas potentially, or views, or experience, or knowledge, or something that we may neglect to tap into because we're sort of, I know what I've got to do here. But did you find anything particularly work well to get ideas from people so they bubble up ideas to you rather than not, having to run the whole thing yourself all the time?
Well, the most important skill you have to develop if you're going to be successful in that kind of role is the skill, and I would have to say for folks who come out of an American culture, a skill that isn't necessarily well honed by dint of your upbringing, is literally to shut up and listen to people. Because the first step, and this is something I think I learned to appreciate or begin to appreciate when I started working in Japan, is how necessary it is to listen to other people before you speak. And particularly if you're in a leadership position, it becomes vital that you not dictate the outcome in advance, even if you know where you want to go. In order to get there, you're going to need the people working with you to accomplish it. And therefore, you've got to hear their perspective. So obviously, you're going to be laying out certain challenges and objectives for folks to discuss. But the key point is to have a real discussion in which you're listening to them as opposed to telling them what they need to do. And that's something that whether you're in government or in the private sector, I find is one of the principal challenges, particularly when you're talking about organizations that are operating between, say, the U.S. or other Western cultures and Japan. And certainly for Americans, the notion that things can get done fast, it can get decided fast, and you can sort out details later is sort of the way we tend to operate. And we've been pretty successul doing that.
Get in the room, debate it, decide it, move on.
Or decide it ahead of time. But
is that a type of nemawashi there? Sort of
well,
lobbying
no,
for the
that's
decision?
the thing. I think in a lot of the West, the nemawashi comes later, after you've decided what you're going to do, right?
Convince everybody to do it.
Whereas in Japan, the nemawashi comes first. You sort out the details, and then you move forward to execution. And in that distinction, if you will, sometimes gaps arise in the ability of organizations to cooperate effectively as communication breaks down or isn't sufficiently effective between the Japanese folks and the American or other foreign folks involved in the discussion. So to me, the first rule is to listen and practice listening to other people and then go from there.
I'm sure you also have occasions where Japan has got its own special factors and features, and so headquarters, be it Washington or be it New York, or commercially, it depends where they've headquartered themselves, but you are trying to explain to people not based in Japan why certain things are not going to happen or are going to be difficult to happen, or why things should happen, or why we need this or why we need that. And I'm sure for the Japanese staff, who are often operating at the working level, they get very frustrated with their counterparts who are not understanding the rationale, and they're sort of driving them and whatever. And as leaders, this is often where we need to bridge in there and bring a viewpoint to the attention of people not located in Japan, and some reality about, well, this is why this is not happening as you think it should happen, and so help out the local staff. So I'm sure that those sorts of things build a lot of trust between you and the teams. But any other things you found particularly work well to build trust with teams here in Japan, be they commercial or be they government?
Well, building on what I said a moment ago about listening to other people, I think for Japanese staff in American-led organizations, it's key, again, to be soliciting their advice in an active way, as opposed to trying to dictate the pace of change or progress, based principally on what the U.S. practice might normally be. And so it's a typical challenge that I find, including now in my role as a consultant, that, back at headquarters, they can't understand why the Japanese office isn't moving more deliberately to accomplish the objectives that have been set out. And the Japanese staff is frustrated because it's difficult to make the folks at headquarters appreciate that things in Japan don't operate the way they operate back home.
Absolutely. I mean, I was working in the embassy. You'd have someone in Australia, some VIP is going to come to Japan, and they expect you to make a whole bunch of meetings available for them like 1 week's time ahead or something. It's like, oh, wait a minute, Japanese are booked out months in advance. What are you talking about? Impossible. No, I'm very important. I've got to meet these people. That was always amusing in a sort of masochistic way. But apart from that, in terms of at the human level, building trust with people, anything particular you found worked well?
Well, there's another aspect to this, which is, again, an American approach, if you will. to trying to get things accomplished overseas tends to be, take me to the top. I want to talk to the top person, and we can make a decision, and everybody else will fall in line, kind of thing. And for organizations in America that do tend to be top driven, that style may be effective. But in Japan, that just doesn't work.
No.
And if
Very disappointingly, I have to say. It'd be much easier. We just get the top guy or gal, we decide, move on, everyone jump into robot.
Right.
That's not how it works.
It's not how it works. And so, it's, as you've indicated, educating the home office on how business needs to be accomplished here and the pace at which it can be accomplished.
Especially if
is
they
one of
meet
the
the
big
top
challenges.
person who says yes, 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 and they think, oh, we've got the deal done, we're good now, we'll wrap this baby up, let's keep going,
Or more likely, they meet the top person and nothing really happens at the meeting.
Yeah, that's also.
Which is another frustration that.
Why am I in
senior
this meeting with this
executives-
person?
Exactly.
Well, how come they don't
why
know
am I
anything?
in this meeting at all?
How come they don't know anything, about what I'm talking about?
So, trying to determine what part of the organization you approach to try to initiate a discussion of whatever issue you're trying to solve, or whatever objective you're trying to accomplish. Figure out where to go in the organization to start, so you can get the ball rolling internally within the Japanese organization you're dealing with. Is a critical element to being successful as a leader here in Japan.
And also, I think as a consultant, your ability to give them that guidance on this is the person at this level that you need to meet, and we'll make the arrangements. Because looking from the outside, it's very difficult, very opaque inside Japanese organizations. You can look at a chart of where people are positioned, but that's not going to help. It's actually, who's who in the zoo here, and having that ability to nominate, okay, this is where we need to put some effort here. Yeah, that speeds things up a lot. And what about culture? When you have, in national organizations, you have the umbrella culture, it would be a State Department or JPMorgan or McLarty or whatever it might be. And then you have Japanese culture. And you can't go against either of those. You go against the umbrella culture of the organization, you're going to be out in your ear. They'll kick you out. If you go against Japanese culture, you don't get anywhere, just quicksand, doesn't take you anywhere. And then you have Chris culture, how you like things to be when you're running it and how you like to see things unfold. So thinking about those different levels of culture, what have you found has worked well to drive the culture that, can't be antithetical to the other two, but within that alignment to have it the way you want it, to bring your idea on how it should be, how we should work as a team, our culture of our team. What has worked well for you to do that?
Well, this is literally the stuff of diplomacy. So in that sense, I would say that a background in the U.S. Foreign Service served me well over the years in terms of appreciating that what you need to do is achieve a collaboration among folks who often don't have completely shared objectives or at least have different perspectives on issues. So that's really a critical element, I think, to success, both within the government but also in the private sector, and probably isn't as appreciated as it might be in the private sector, certainly in the United States. Now, you can definitely find extremely skilled diplomats in any major U.S. business. Most of the folks who make it to the top have a certain degree of diplomatic skill, or they wouldn't have been able to get to those positions in the first place. But that ability to listen to others and try to help communicate across levels, I think becomes a critical element. Figuring out how in that process to also inject the objectives that you have been mandated or are hoping to achieve is again part of the mix that you have to bring together to be successful as a diplomat, again, whether in government or in business.
We talked before about you actually made an interesting comparison there of the American military and the government in terms of rather hierarchical, top-down, decision-driven from somewhere above you, not your decision, somewhere above you. And so you have to fit into line. But what did you find, say, in the private sector? Because it's got a number of different leverage points there around how decisions are made. But getting people to follow, to agree to follow, and happily follow. Anything there around culture? Because I worked for a boss who was ex-military, and his culture was military, very severe, driven, top-down, tough, hard style of leadership, and that's unfortunately for me, I copied that for a few years until I discovered Dale Carnegie and I learnt the error of my ways. But you do get influenced by those sorts of cultural aspects in organizations, depending how they're situated. But what did you find in terms of Japan, which is, not necessarily so hierarchical and certainly not militaristic, used to be, but not anymore, in terms of the culture that you wanted to have for your team? How did you think about treating them? How did you get them to coalesce? How did you get them to cooperate? How did you get them to follow your direction or contribute or whatever was going on there?
Well, I think the first thing to say would be that Japanese culture, you're correct, is certainly no longer the way it once was in the feudal era. But I think, nevertheless, it is pretty hierarchical. And one of the benefits of a career like mine, where you come back, again and again to Japan, is you find that your counterparts have also been rising within the same organization in a very predictable fashion. And that gives you a set of contacts on which you can draw, that will help enormously in your success. So I'm not sure this is a leadership skill that, in the sense, you can practice, but at least if you're going to be dealing with Japan and expect to have a career in business related to Japan, the key is to keep coming back, and because the people that you're dealing with as you're, when you're the junior most person, are going to be in the next position up in a few years, and further up the chain a few years after that. And over time, that produces a network that Japanese themselves, as you suggested earlier, draw very effectively on in their work, and we can, by continuing to maintain that presence in Japan, also build, or at least benefit from, those same sort of network effects to the benefit of our businesses. So one of the things I would advise businesses on would be to keep your staff coming back to Japan, because over the long run, that's going to benefit your company enormously.
Well, one of our mutual friends is Glenn Fukushima, of course. Last big job was running Airbus here in Japan and doing all sorts of exciting things. He's writing a book on Silicon Valley and Japan at Stanford at the moment on a particular arrangement he's got there. But he always amazed me, absolutely continues to amaze me, still amazes me, of what a phenomenally big network he developed, but not only developing it, but maintaining it. that really just staggered me how he could maintain it. And so, again, as you say, you're developing over time, you're developing networks here of people, and they're moving up in their careers, be it government, be it private sector, doesn't matter. But I'm pretty busy, like day to day. I'm a pretty busy guy trying to keep track of all these people. It's like, geez, it's quite hard. Anything you found worked well to keep those contacts alive, particularly when you're in and out of the country as well as you've been, or you're traveling a fair bit? How do you find keeping those contacts warm?
I don't find it that difficult, perhaps because, being involved in a variety of organizations that some of my contacts are also involved in creates natural opportunities to maintain contact. But, we're having conversations about succeeding in Japan in an era in which Japan is changing.
Yes.
And so whether some of the practices we're talking about will necessarily be as effective a year or two from now as they've been in the past is arguable. But for example, the Japanese tend to exchange a fair amount of written greetings over the course of a year, and it's as we've both been here for a while. You constantly receive little postcards, offering a greeting for appropriate to the season of the year, or at year's end you'll be receiving a New Year's greeting card, and a lot of companies have picked up on this and recognize that they need to do it. I'm hesitating a little bit as I mention this, only because I think Japan is changing.
It's going
the
down.
Digital age is going down. Is impacting Japanese practices as much as it is elsewhere. So it will be more challenging to maintain that over time. But the flip side is maintaining face-to-face communication has become a lot easier by virtue of the opportunity to have virtual conferences over the internet. And
the tyranny of distance has been defeated in that sense.
It has indeed. So you have an opportunity in that way also to stay literally in front of people and maintaining whether you call it a list or a set of contacts that you do try to access on a regular basis, I think is one important skill that will reward you well in Japan.
You're giving advice as a consultant to companies, in Japan, coming into Japan as well. But if someone rang you up and said, "Hey, Chris, my company's appointed me president of our Japan operation. I'm going to be taking over very shortly, but I don't know anything about Japan. I don't speak Japanese. You've been there for decades. Give me some advice, Chris. What would make me an effective leader in Japan?" If you had to sort of boil it, would this be days of advice? I know, but if we're sort of boiling it down to the key aspects for people who don't know Japan to be successful here as an effective leader, what would be some relevant advice you'd give them?
Well, there are probably a number of things you'd have to point to after you suggested that they hire you. But,
yes, they definitely need Dale Carnegie training to help them. No question about that.
But first off, details matter in Japan. And as I mentioned a little while ago, there is a typically American style of leadership, which involves reaching decisions based on principles or broad objectives before you've necessarily ironed out all the details. And in Japan, you need to sort out the details before you can get everybody to buy in to your plan.
I find that the, De Bono's 6 thinking hats, you remember those? The black hat was the the sort of evaluation stage of the ideas. I think all the Japanese come equipped with the black hat because they're fantastic at telling you what's wrong with your idea and why it's never going to work. So that's definitely built into the culture, isn't it? That's a risk aversion. Be very careful. Think about every possible thing to go wrong and anticipate. Yeah, I just don't think my Aussie brain is sort of geared up that way. I'm more, let's make it happen, you know. But
well, the second thing and related point is that Japan operates like a Swiss watch. And, you know, we all appreciate that the trains run on time, things are clean and safe, that the plumber comes on time and cleans up after him or herself, et cetera. But that's all based on a system in which everyone knows what their role is in often very minute detail, and is dedicated to fulfilling that role as best they can. And that sounds ideal in some ways, but it also has costs, because that means change involves not just a discrete tweak here or there. It involves a impact on the entire system. Going back to the point we made a moment ago, it's not just the details matter. It's also that Japan is like a Swiss watch, and in that sense, change is challenging, because any minute tweak you're going to make here or there inevitably impacts the smooth operation of the entire system. And so without that insight, a foreign leader coming into a Japanese environment is simply not going to appreciate how much preparation needs to be done in Japan to make the system operate. Now, sometimes, you know, that's a situation in which a foreign company actually will, in some cases quite properly, be looking to drive real change, a change that does break the system, if you will, because the system isn't working properly anymore. But even in those circumstances, you need to understand what you're breaking and how that's going to affect the other systems that are connected to it.
Also, I often find that the Japanese staff are bending over backwards to keep the clients happy. And so that will tweak systems internally as well, and it'll sort of contort systems internally as well to keep them happy. And so when you turn up, you go, well, this is all contorted and twisted. I've got to straighten that baby out. But you don't know why it's like that, because there's no explanation to you that this is, well, this client was forcing us to do it this way and we have to keep them happy. So we had to change it like this. And eventually, if you go and talk to the client, then the penny drops. Like, okay, now I understand why my team are resisting me to fix up this contortion, because that's actually keeping that particular important client happy. So any other advice you'd give them?
So then, you know, there come down to the things that sound trite but are important, which is, first off, understanding what your Japanese counterpart is or your staff is trying to tell you when they say yes. And it's not always what you think.
That's true.
And the reality is Japanese are, you know, this is, again, one of those things that's probably changing in Japanese culture, but there tends to be an aversion to confrontation. And a focus on how to maintain harmony that can lead Japanese staff to not communicate effectively to the foreign folks they're trying to work with. And so, you know, again, this is part of listening, you know, in a concerted, a sufficiently concerted way to what people are really saying when they say yes, because it might not be what they mean to communicate.
Well, having both worked in government, I was reminded the character Sir Humphrey Appleby in that British TV series Minister and then Yes Minister. yes, Prime Minister, and his ability to just be circuitous in the language and vague. And when you're listening to that in the English system, it's quite funny. But you think to yourself, well, that's Japan too. They're just experts at talking like that around the point without actually making any point whatsoever. You're sitting and thinking, okay, I don't understand what's going on here, but it sounds incredible. If you're going to give, sort of think about a definition.
I just say to that point that sometimes what sounds circuitous to us is nevertheless quite clear to all of the Japanese folks in the room.
That's a good point.
And this is one of the things, again, you've got to watch out for in communicating in that sort of diverse environment where the just as you know well in the Japanese language, you don't necessarily have to indicate clearly the subjects and sometimes not even the objects of your sentences. So because it's understood from the context what you mean to say. And there's a lot of that contextual communication that goes on in Japan that it takes time for any foreigner coming into the environment to appreciate.
Should they learn Japanese, do you think?
Again, one of those things that may be changing over time. Certainly, I would have said that 10, 20 years ago. There is a growing number of Japanese people who speak quite effective English, and you see obvious examples of that in foreign-based companies throughout Japan today, which are often staffed, indeed fully staffed by Japanese national employees who are quite effective in communicating, at least verbally, in English. And so that, there is the opportunity, certainly, to operate in English today in Japan in a way that, simply wouldn't have been very comfortable not so long ago.
Well, thanks to ChatGPT, my Japanese typing
Right.
has improved out of sight. Incredibly big improvement these days.
Exactly. We
I love
sound
that.
a lot better than we used to.
I love that.
But having said that, your understanding, again, of communication in Japan is certainly going to be more sophisticated if you appreciate the challenges of communicating in the language yourself. I would say, even if you don't have the time, and obviously it takes a lot of time to become professionally fluent in Japanese, studying enough so that you appreciate how the language is structured and the thought process that goes into constructing a Japanese sentence. I think having that appreciation, will be, give you a great advantage in being effective here in Japan.
It's also strange, isn't it? I mean, when you're learning a foreign language, you don't have a very big vocabulary, you have a sketchy grasp of grammar. However, your ability to read body language and to, track maybe a few of the words you actually recognize and connect those things together is like incredibly, superhuman levels of understanding based on very little real data, actually. But you actually can, with a few words, knowledge of a few words, and reading what's going on, you can actually follow quite well the direction of a conversation or a decision coming up. It always amazes me. And what about a definition of leadership for you? How would you define leadership?
It seems to me a leader has to have the ability to inspire the people they're working with, whether superior or supporting, to achieve the objectives that, first and foremost, you recognize as important, but obviously encompassing the objectives of the organization, and in some cases even the broader world beyond the organization that you recognize are important to that company and your environment. So the ability to inspire people, of course, varies tremendously among individuals. Some people have an innate gift, and you see that in operation, when you're in grade school from the very beginning. But it is a skill, I think, that can be honed over time, particularly as you advance in your career and you gain the opportunity to not just follow orders, but actually to have to first deliver them to others, and then eventually to be charged with formulating them yourself in growing levels of responsibility. So that's a very sort of hierarchical view of the world, which I guess is what you would expect from somebody who came out of the bureaucracy in my country and has worked in other big organizations. But nevertheless, I think that's the, to me, barring, the inspired individual who can, create a unicorn company out of nothing. And of course, there are such individuals, and you have to recognize that talent when it appears. But I would say that talent is few and far between. And for most organizations, figuring out ways to put people in positions where potentially they may fail, in the long run is going to be giving them the sort of training that will make them more effective leaders over the long run. Having that long run perspective, it seems to me, and here I'm sort of seguing in terms of leadership to somebody who's leading an organization. I think figuring out how to recognize the skills of the individuals you work with one by one, and putting them in the position which will maximize their ability to utilize their skills. I think that's really the key to being successful.
Well, Chris, thank you. Great to chat about Japan and leading.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.